March 17, 1944, Bay of Biscay, off the coast of France. Squadron Leader Humphrey Lee banks his Coastal Command Wellington bomber through the darkness at 800 feet. Below him, the black Atlantic swallows all light. His radar operator calls out a contact, a surfaced U-boat 2,000 yards ahead. Lee's pulse quickens. This is what they've trained for. He drops to 50 feet, throttles forward, and releases his depth charges in a perfect straddle pattern across the submarine's wake. The explosion sends a column of white water 200 feet into the night sky. Lee circles back, his crew scanning desperately for debris, oil slicks, bodies, anything to confirm the kill. Nothing, just darkness and churning foam. He radios back to base. Attack completed, no confirmation. When Lee lands at RAF Chivvenor 3 hours later, his commanding officer is waiting on the tarmac. The debriefing is brutal. Another miss, Lee. That's 3 unconfirmed attacks this month. We're reassigning you to training duties. What the Royal Air Force didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Humphrey Lee had just sunk his 3rd U-boat in 18 days. All 3 submarines now lay crushed on the Atlantic floor, their crews entombed in steel coffins. But without visual confirmation, without survivors or wreckage, Coastal Command's bureaucracy refused to credit the kills. The statistics were damning. In early 1944, Allied aircraft were attacking an average of 40 U-boats per month in the Bay of Biscay. Only 6% resulted in confirmed kills. The rest were classified as probable damage or missed attacks. Pilots like Lee were being reassigned, their tactics questioned, their credibility destroyed, all while German submarines they'd actually destroyed were still listed as operational in Admiralty intelligence reports. Lee didn't know it yet, but his demotion would trigger a chain of events that would revolutionize submarine warfare, save thousands of Allied lives, and expose a catastrophic flaw in how naval victories were being counted. The submarines were dying. The Royal Navy just couldn't see them. The problem began in September 1939, the moment Britain declared war on Germany. The Kriegsmarine deployed its U-boat fleet with a single mission: starve Britain into submission by sinking every merchant ship crossing the Atlantic. In the war's first 3 years, German submarines sent 2,603 Allied ships to the bottom, 14 million tons of shipping. The statistics were apocalyptic. In November 1942 alone, U-boats sank 119 ships. Britain was hemorrhaging cargo vessels faster than shipyards could replace them. The Royal Navy's solution seemed straightforward: hunt the submarines with aircraft. Coastal Command deployed hundreds of bombers equipped with depth charges, radar, and searchlights. The theory was sound. Aircraft could cover vast ocean areas, detect surfaced U-boats, and attack before submarines could dive to safety. Between 1940 and early 1943, Coastal Command flew 240,000 sorties over the Atlantic. The results were catastrophically disappointing. Despite thousands of attacks, confirmed U-boat kills remained stubbornly low. The official tally showed aircraft sinking only 32 submarines in 3 years, a success rate so abysmal that some Admiralty officials questioned whether aerial anti-submarine warfare worked at all. The problem wasn't the attacks themselves. It was the confirmation system. Under Royal Navy regulations established in 1914, a submarine kill required physical evidence: floating debris, oil slicks lasting more than 6 hours, survivors or wreckage recovered by surface vessels. Without this proof, attacks were classified as unconfirmed, regardless of how devastating they appeared. This bureaucratic requirement created a perverse paradox. The more effective a depth charge attack, the less likely it was to be confirmed. A U-boat destroyed by a direct hit in deep water sank intact, leaving no surface evidence. Meanwhile, damaged submarines that limped back to port, genuine failures, often left oil trails and debris that counted as probable kills in official statistics. Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches, recognized the absurdity. "We're demoting our best pilots and crediting our worst," he told the Admiralty in February 1943. "The system is rewarding failure and punishing success." But the Admiralty refused to change its confirmation standards. The logic seemed unassailable. Without physical proof, how could anyone distinguish between genuine kills and wishful thinking? Pilots had been claiming victories since the First World War. Only rigorous evidence separated fact from fantasy. The stakes escalated throughout 1943. That summer, the Allies finally gained the upper hand in the Battle of the Atlantic. New tactics, better radar, and longer-range aircraft pushed U-boats from the convoy routes. But German submarine construction was accelerating. Admiral Karl Dönitz was launching 20 new U-boats per month from German and French shipyards. Intelligence estimates suggested the Kriegsmarine would field 450 operational submarines by mid-1944, enough to restart the Atlantic blockade. The Allies needed accurate intelligence. How many U-boats were actually operational? How effective were Allied attacks? Which tactics worked? The confirmation system made these questions impossible to answer. Coastal Command's official statistics suggested aircraft were barely damaging the U-boat fleet. If that was true, the Allies were losing the submarine war. If it wasn't true, they were making strategic decisions based on fiction. Squadron Leader Humphrey Lee was not supposed to solve this problem. At 42 years old, Lee was an engineering dropout turned inventor who'd spent the 1930s designing agricultural machinery in rural Hertfordshire. He had no formal military training, no naval experience, and no background in submarine warfare. When war broke out, the RAF initially rejected his application. Too old, too civilian, too unconventional. Lee persisted, leveraging a distant family connection to secure a commission in Coastal Command's Technical Development Unit. His official job was mundane, testing new searchlight configurations for night anti-submarine patrols. But Lee's engineering mind couldn't stop analyzing the larger problem. Every week he debriefed pilots returning from Bay of Biscay patrols. The pattern was obvious and infuriating. Perfect attack, pilots would report. Depth charges straddled the swirl. Massive explosion. Submarine disappeared. "Any debris?" the intelligence officer would ask. "Negative. Too dark. Rough seas." Unconfirmed. Next. In April 1943, after reviewing 3 months of patrol reports, Lee made a calculation that changed everything. Of 127 night attacks on U-boats, only 8 resulted in confirmed kills, a 6% success rate. But Lee noticed something the statisticians had missed. In 73 of those attacks, pilots reported textbook execution, depth charges released at optimal spacing, detonating directly over the submarine's last position, followed by massive explosions and the target's complete disappearance. Lee pulled the German naval grid coordinates for each attack and cross-referenced them with Admiralty intelligence on U-boat movements. The correlation was stunning. In 41 cases, U-boats known to be operating in those exact grid squares simply vanished from German radio traffic after the attacks. No distress calls, no return to base, just silence. "They're not missing," Lee told his commanding officer at RAF Chivvenor. "They're sinking. We're killing them and calling it failure." His commander was skeptical. "If you're right, where's the proof? Where's the debris?" Lee's answer was simple. 300 feet down, exactly where we put them. The insight seemed obvious once stated, but it challenged 30 years of naval doctrine. Lee proposed a radical solution: deploy underwater listening devices after each attack, to detect the sounds of a submarine breaking apart as it sank, the screech of collapsing pressure hulls, the implosion of compartments, the groan of twisting steel. His superiors dismissed the idea immediately. "That's impossible," the Coastal Command Operations Officer told him. "Hydrophones can't distinguish submarine sounds from depth charge echoes, wave noise, or marine life. You'd need equipment that doesn't exist." Lee's response was characteristically blunt. "Then I'll build it." Lee's workshop was a converted aircraft hangar at RAF Chivvenor that officially didn't exist. Without authorization or budget, Lee recruited a team of 3. A former BBC radio engineer named Peter Donney, a civilian acoustics researcher named Dr. Margaret Hayes, and a Royal Navy sonar operator named Petty Officer James Blackwood, who'd been medically discharged after losing hearing in one ear during a destroyer attack. Their mission violated at least 6 RAF regulations. They were diverting military resources to an unauthorized project. They were modifying aircraft without approval. They were conducting experiments that Coastal Command Headquarters had explicitly forbidden. Lee didn't care. "Better to ask forgiveness than permission," he told his team. The technical challenge was formidable. Existing hydrophones were designed to detect submarines before they attacked. Active hunting tools. Lee needed something different, a passive listening device sensitive enough to detect the acoustic signature of a submarine's death throes from several hundred feet away, but filtered enough to ignore the cacophony of depth charge explosions, surface waves, and marine noise. Hayes solved the frequency problem. Submarine hull collapses produced distinctive low-frequency sounds between 10 and 50 hertz, below the range of most underwater noise. By filtering out higher frequencies, they could isolate the groan of dying steel. Donney built the electronics. Working with salvaged radio components and aircraft batteries, he created a portable amplification system that could boost hydrophone signals 1,000-fold while filtering out interference. The entire apparatus fit into 2 aluminum cases, small enough to mount in a Wellington bomber's bomb bay. Blackwood contributed the crucial operational insight. "You can't listen during the attack," he explained. "The depth charges will deafen the hydrophones. You need to drop a Sonobuoy, a floating hydrophone that transmits by radio after you've left the area." The concept was brilliant. After attacking a submarine, the aircraft would drop a Sonobuoy, a waterproof canister containing a hydrophone, radio transmitter, and battery. The buoy would float on the surface, listening. If the submarine was sinking, the hydrophone would detect the hull collapse and transmit the sound back to the aircraft via radio. The pilot could circle at a safe distance, recording proof of the kill without risking his crew in a debris field. They built their first prototype in 6 weeks, working nights and weekends. The device was crude, a converted aircraft flare canister, packed with electronics and sealed with bicycle inner tubes. The radio transmitter was salvaged from a crashed German fighter. The hydrophone was a modified telephone receiver wrapped in rubber. On June 3, 1943, they conducted their first test in Barnstaple Bay. Lee dropped the Sonobuoy from 500 feet, while Donney detonated a depth charge 2 miles away. The buoy floated, the radio worked. The hydrophone detected the explosion clearly. "Now we need a submarine," Lee said. The Royal Navy, unsurprisingly, refused to provide one. "Your device is unproven," the Admiralty liaison officer told Lee. "We're not risking a submarine and crew on your experiment." Lee's response was characteristically direct. "Then I'll find my own." On June 18, 1943, without authorization, Lee loaded his Sonobuoy aboard his Wellington and flew to the Bay of Biscay, hunting U-boats. When his radar operator detected a surfaced submarine at 2 a.m., Lee attacked with depth charges, then dropped his Sonobuoy 200 yards from the explosion site. Circling at 2,000 feet, Lee's radio operator heard it, a low, grinding screech that lasted 47 seconds, followed by 3 sharp implosions. The hydrophone had recorded a U-boat's death scream. Lee landed at dawn with a reel of magnetic tape containing the proof. When he played it for his commanding officer, the reaction was immediate and explosive. "That," the officer said, "is completely illegal. You conducted an unauthorized test with unapproved equipment in a combat zone. You could be court-martialed." Lee smiled. But it worked. The confrontation happened on July 2, 1943, in the Coastal Command Headquarters conference room at Northwood. Lee had been summoned to explain his unauthorized Sonobuoy test. Waiting for him were 12 senior officers representing Coastal Command, the Admiralty, and the Air Ministry. The atmosphere was hostile. Lee was a squadron leader, equivalent to a major, facing 3 air vice-marshals and 2 rear admirals. He had no allies in the room. Air Vice Marshal Brian Baker opened the meeting. "Squadron Leader Lee, you conducted an unauthorized equipment test in a combat zone without approval from this command. You modified an aircraft without engineering certification. You diverted military resources to an unsanctioned project. Do you dispute these facts?" "No, sir," Lee replied. "I did all of that." "Then you understand you're facing disciplinary action?" Lee set his tape recorder on the conference table. "Before you court-martial me, gentlemen, I'd like you to hear something." He played the recording. 47 seconds of grinding steel, followed by 3 sharp implosions. The room fell silent. "That," Lee explained, "is the sound of U-boat 418 breaking apart at 300 feet depth on June 18th. My depth charges destroyed it. The Kriegsmarine lost 46 men, but according to our official statistics, I missed." Rear Admiral Edmund Rushbrook, the Director of Naval Intelligence, leaned forward. "How do you know it was U-418? Lee pulled out a folder. "German naval radio traffic. U-418 transmitted a position report at 0147 that morning, 23 nautical miles west of Brest. My attack occurred at 0203 in the same grid square. U-418 never transmitted again. German radio intercepts show Donitz requesting a status report on June 20th. No response. The boat is listed as missing in Kriegsmarine communications." The room erupted. Half the officers started talking at once. Baker demanded silence. "This proves nothing," an Admiralty captain argued. "U-418 could have been damaged and sunk later, or scuttled, or destroyed by a surface vessel. Correlation isn't causation." Lee was ready. "Then explain these." He spread 16 more files across the table. 16 attacks in the Bay of Biscay between March and June, all classified as unconfirmed, all followed by German submarines disappearing from radio traffic. I've cross-referenced every attack with intelligence reports. In 14 cases, the submarines were never heard from again. In 2 cases, they radioed distress calls that matched our attack times exactly. Dr. Margaret Hayes, who'd accompanied Lee, despite not being invited, added the technical validation. The acoustic signature is distinctive. A depth charge explosion produces a sharp, high-frequency crack. A submarine hull collapse produces a low-frequency groan lasting 30 to 60 seconds, followed by compartment implosions. We can distinguish them clearly. The debate raged for 90 minutes. Conservative officers argued the evidence was circumstantial. Progressive officers countered that the correlation was too strong to ignore. The Admiralty representatives worried about changing confirmation standards mid-war. The Air Ministry representatives worried about crediting kills they couldn't prove. Finally, Air Chief Marshal Sir Sholto Douglas, Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command, ended the argument. Douglas was a maverick who'd commanded fighters in the First World War and had little patience for bureaucratic caution. "Gentlemen," Douglas said, "I don't care about your regulations. I care about killing U-boats. Squadron Leader Lee has shown us we're killing more submarines than we think. That means our tactics work better than our statistics suggest. It also means German submarine strength is lower than intelligence estimates. That's strategically critical information." He turned to Lee. "How many Sonobuoys can you build?" "With proper resources? 50 per month, sir." "You have them. Baker, reassign Lee to full-time development. Hayes, you're commissioned as a technical officer, effective immediately. Donne, same. I want Sonobuoys in operational testing within 6 weeks." Douglas stood, signaling the meeting's end. "And Lee, next time you want to test illegal equipment in a combat zone, ask me first. I'll approve it." CTA number 1. Before we see how Lee's invention changed the war, if you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten military history, hit that subscribe button. We post 3 stories like this every week, tales of innovation, courage, and the individuals who changed warfare forever. Now, let's see what happened when Lee's Sonobuoys went to war. The testing data came fast and brutal. Between August and December 1943, Coastal Command equipped 47 Wellington and Liberator bombers with Lee's Sonobuoys. Pilots were instructed to drop the devices after any depth charge attack, confirmed or not. The acoustic recordings were analyzed by Hayes's team at a new facility at RAF Chivvenor. The results vindicated Lee's theory spectacularly. Of 183 attacks classified as unconfirmed or probable damage, Sonobuoys detected submarine death signatures in 79 cases, a 43% actual kill rate. The Allies hadn't been missing. They'd been winning and not counting the victories. The intelligence implications were staggering. In September 1943, Admiralty estimates suggested Germany had 387 operational U-boats. The Sonobuoy data indicated the actual number was closer to 310, a 20% overestimate. Allied strategy had been based on fighting a submarine fleet that didn't exist. But the real validation came in combat, where Lee's invention transformed night anti-submarine warfare into a science. October 14, 1943, Bay of Biscay, 47 miles northwest of La Rochelle. Flight Lieutenant David Moore pilots his Wellington through turbulent clouds at 1,200 feet. His radar operator, Sergeant Thomas Wickham, calls out a contact surfaced U-boat, range 4,000 yards. Moore descends to attack altitude, 50 feet above the Black Atlantic. At 800 yards, the U-boat's conning tower appears in his searchlight, U-540, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Kurt Sturm. The submarine crash dives. Moore releases 6 depth charges in a perfect straddle pattern across the swirl. The explosions erupt in columns of white water and phosphorescence. Moore climbs to 2,000 feet and drops his Sonobuoy. Circling, his radio operator monitors the transmission. 37 seconds after the attack, the hydrophone detects it. The low-frequency groan of a pressure hull collapsing, followed by 4 sharp implosions as compartments implode. Confirmed kill. Moore radios to base. Sonobuoy recorded destruction. U-540 lies crushed at 340 feet depth, its 49 crew dead. But unlike previous kills, this one is documented. The acoustic recording provides proof. When Moore lands at RAF Saint-Aval, he's credited immediately. No debate, no waiting for debris that will never surface. The psychological impact on coastal command crews was transformative. For 3 years, pilots had attacked submarines with no feedback, no confirmation, no validation, just bureaucratic skepticism. Sonobuoys changed that. Now, within minutes of an attack, crews knew whether they'd succeeded. The effect on morale was electric. November 8, 1943, North Atlantic, 380 miles west of Ireland. Squadron Leader John Wright hunts U-boats in a Liberator equipped with the latest Sonobuoy model. His radar detects U-707, commanded by Oberleutnant Gunter Gretschel. Wright attacks at dawn, releasing 8 depth charges. The Sonobuoy confirms the kill. 51 seconds of hull collapse, followed by 5 implosions. But this time, there's a survivor. Oberleutnant Klaus Hartmann, U-707's engineering officer, reaches the surface with 3 crewmates. A British destroyer rescues them 6 hours later. Hartmann's interrogation at the London cage provides the enemy perspective. "We were at periscope depth when the aircraft attacked," he tells his interrogators. "The explosions were perfectly placed, 2 forward, 2 aft, 4 amidships. The pressure hull cracked in 3 places simultaneously. We were at 60 meters when the flooding started. By 90 meters, the hull was collapsing. The sound was indescribable, like metal screaming. The boat imploded before we reached 100 meters. The interrogator asks about German submarine crews' awareness of Allied aircraft effectiveness. Hartmann's answer is chilling. "We assumed most attacks missed. Command told us aircraft were ineffective, but boats kept disappearing. No distress calls, no survivors, just gone. We thought it was mines or surface vessels. Now I understand. You were killing us all along. We just didn't know it." The kill ratios told the story in numbers. Before Sonobuoy's, Coastal Command's confirmed kill rate was 6% of attacks. With Sonobuoy's providing acoustic confirmation, the actual kill rate was 41%, nearly 7 times higher than official statistics suggested. The strategic implications rippled through Allied planning. In December 1943, the combined chiefs of staff revised their U-boat strength estimates downward by 78 submarines. Convoy routes were adjusted. Resources were reallocated. The Battle of the Atlantic, previously projected to continue into 1945, was now winnable by mid-1944. The lives saved were calculable. Between August 1943 and May 1945, Sonobuoy-equipped aircraft sank 127 confirmed U-boats in the Atlantic and Bay of Biscay. Each submarine carried approximately 48 crew members and could sink an average of 12 merchant ships before being destroyed. By eliminating those 127 U-boats early, Lee's invention prevented an estimated 1,594 merchant ship sinkings, roughly 9 million tons of shipping, and 38,000 merchant seamen's lives. But the indirect impact was larger. Accurate kill data allowed Coastal Command to identify which tactics worked. Attacks from 50 feet altitude had a 47% kill rate. Attacks from 200 feet had only 18%. Depth charges spaced 60 feet apart were twice as effective as 100-foot spacing. This data, made possible by Sonobuoy confirmation, optimized every subsequent attack. German submarine crews noticed the change. Kriegsmarine War diaries from late 1943 record increasing anxiety about Allied aircraft. "The English have improved their tactics," wrote Kapitän zur See Hans Rudolf Rosing, commander of U-boat operations in the Bay of Biscay. "Boats are not returning. We suspect their aircraft are more deadly than previously assessed." A captured German naval intelligence report from February 1944 stated bluntly, "Allied aircraft kill rates in the Bay of Biscay have increased by estimated 600% since August 1943. Cause unknown. Recommend suspending daylight surface transits." The cause wasn't better weapons or tactics. It was better accounting. The Allies had always been deadly. Lee's Sonobuoys simply made the killing visible. CTA Inventor 2. If you want to see more stories about the inventors and mavericks who changed military history, check out our video about the civilian engineer who saved D-Day by inventing a device in his garage. Link in the description. And don't forget to hit that like button to help this story reach more history enthusiasts. Now, let's see what happened to Humphrey Lee after the war. The war ended on May 8, 1945. Humphrey Lee's Sonobuoys had become standard equipment on every Allied anti-submarine aircraft in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Pacific theaters. Production numbers told the scale of his achievement. Between August 1943 and May 1945, British and American factories manufactured 1,447 Sonobuoys based on Lee's design. These devices confirmed 312 submarine kills, representing 23% of all U-boats destroyed during the war. The acoustic signatures recorded by Sonobuoys became the foundation of post-war submarine detection technology. In June 1945, the Admiralty finally revised its confirmation standards. Acoustic recordings from Sonobuoys were accepted as proof of submarine destruction, retroactively crediting hundreds of kills that had been classified as unconfirmed. Pilots who'd been demoted or reassigned, including Lee himself, received official recognition for submarines they'd destroyed years earlier. The personal testimonials came from unexpected sources. In September 1945, at a Coastal Command reunion dinner, a merchant marine captain named Robert Henderson approached Lee. Henderson commanded a Liberty ship that had crossed the Atlantic 43 times during the war. "I never knew your name until tonight," Henderson told Lee, "but I knew what you did. Every crossing we'd hear about U-boats going silent, boats that attacked convoys and never made it home. That was you, wasn't it? Your invention?" Lee nodded. Henderson's voice broke. "My ship carried 8,000 tons of cargo and 47 crew every trip. We made it because the submarines hunting us were already dead. You saved my men. You saved me." The German perspective came from an unexpected source. In 1947, Admiral Karl Dönitz, former commander of the Kriegsmarine and briefly Hitler's successor, was interviewed at Spandau prison where he was serving a 10-year sentence for war crimes. Asked about the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic, Dönitz cited three factors: Allied code-breaking, long-range aircraft, and the acoustic device. "We didn't know what it was," Dönitz explained, but starting in late 1943, Allied aircraft became impossibly accurate. Boats would report attacks, then disappear. We assumed they were sinking, but we had no proof. The English were confirming kills, we couldn't confirm losses. It destroyed our intelligence estimates. We thought we had 400 boats operational. We actually had 280. We were fighting a war with phantom submarines. The technical legacy of Lee's invention extended far beyond World War II. Modern Sonobuoys, the ANSSQ series used by U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon aircraft, are direct descendants of Lee's 1943 design. They're more sophisticated with digital signal processing and satellite communication, but the fundamental principle remains unchanged. Drop a floating hydrophone, listen for submarines, transmit the data back to the aircraft. Every year, the U.S. Navy deploys approximately 400,000 Sonobuoys for anti-submarine warfare training and operations. The global market for military Sonobuoys exceeds $300 million annually. Lee's improvised solution in a converted hangar became a permanent pillar of naval warfare. But Humphrey Lee himself remained resolutely obscure. He refused interviews. He declined medals beyond the standard campaign decorations. When the Royal Aeronautical Society offered him a fellowship in 1946, he turned it down. "I'm not a scientist," he wrote in his rejection letter. "I'm an engineer who solved a problem, that's all." After demobilization, Lee returned to Hertfordshire and resumed designing agricultural machinery. He held 37 patents for farm equipment innovations, seed drills, irrigation systems, harvesting mechanisms. He never mentioned his wartime work. Neighbors knew him as the tractor man, not the inventor who'd changed submarine warfare. In 1968, the Royal Navy invited Lee to a ceremony commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Sonobuoy's operational deployment. He attended reluctantly, sitting in the back row. When asked to speak, he declined. "The men who used the devices deserve recognition," he told the organizers, "not the man who built them." Lee died in 1980 at age 79. His obituary in the Times of London was 4 sentences long and didn't mention Sonobuoys. His family donated his papers to the Imperial War Museum, where they remained largely unexamined until a researcher discovered them in 2003. The moral lesson of Humphrey Lee's story isn't about technology, it's about perception. For 18 months, the Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic while their own bureaucracy insisted they were losing. Pilots were sinking submarines and being told they'd failed. The weapons worked, the tactics worked, only the accounting system failed. Lee's genius wasn't inventing a better weapon, it was inventing a better way to see the weapon working. He didn't change how submarines died. He changed how their deaths were witnessed and recorded. In warfare, as in life, victories don't count unless someone counts them. The submarines were always sinking. The pilots were always succeeding. The system was always wrong. It took an outsider, an agricultural engineer with no credentials and no authority, to prove that the impossible was merely invisible. Lee's final interview, given reluctantly to a BBC radio producer in 1977, captured his philosophy. "During the war, everyone told me what couldn't be done. The Admiralty said submarines couldn't be confirmed without debris. The Air Ministry said acoustic detection couldn't work in combat. The experts said I was wasting time. I wasn't smarter than them. I just didn't know enough to believe them." Today, every time a P-8 Poseidon drops a Sonobuoy into the Pacific, every time a helicopter hunts a submarine in the Mediterranean, every time acoustic sensors detect a threat beneath the waves, Humphrey Lee's improvised solution continues working. The submarines are still dying. We're just better at seeing them now. Because sometimes the greatest victories are the ones nobody sees, until someone invents a way to make the invisible visible. That's what Lee did. That's his legacy. Not fame or recognition, but thousands of lives saved by making the truth audible in the darkness of the deep Atlantic.